In this video, we are going to start working our way down the various project settings that exist underneath the Edit menu and Project Settings. And the very first option we have is Input. Now, this allows you to specify various inputs that the player is going to need access to when playing your game. And there are a lot of inputs here by default, such as your vertical axis, your horizontal axis, your various fire buttons that you may need, jump buttons, and the like. But you can create other inputs. And why would you want to do this kind of thing?
Well, one of the things where this comes into play is more so inside of scripting. What this does is it gives you a way to tie user input in with your scripts. In this case, let's say I want to code a particular action to happen when the player hits the jump button.
Well, we could come into, say, either one of our jumps. It looks like we actually have two here. Mm-hmm. And we can expand that.
Right. And if you look at it, the jump on this one is wired up to the x-axis or get motion from at the very bottom where it says type. So it's got key or mouse button, axis X. So these are basically defining how the button is sensed. I really don't want to get too in deep with this. It's also set up positive button joystick button 3. Now if you click on the other jump,
way up here at the top.
Yep. So you'll see that this one is tied into the space button.
Now, why would you need two?
Well, let's say you were using a joystick controller. So now what this is doing is it's setting up your keypad or your joystick controller button 3 to act as your jump button.
That's right. So you could use the keyboard or a joypad if you wanted to.
Right. Or if you didn't have that and you were using your keyboard, the spacebar becomes your jump button. So what this does is it allows you to set up what functionality is going to trigger the jump command. Let's see if I can explain this in terms of code. When we code, we can check on the input. It's a class called input, and we say get button. Mm-hmm. So we can check to see if that button is down or up. And when we check that button, if I were to have to hand code that, I would have to go check to see if somebody's pressed the space button. Mm-hmm. If they've pressed the space bar, jump. And then if they press if I wanted it to work with a controller, I'd have to say, all right, now go check the joystick button 3. And then I'd have to code for all these different conditions. Mm-hmm. With this, I can go, hey, check to see if the jump button was pressed.
Nice.
And it will automatically go, well, hold on, spacebar button was pressed. Oh, but joystick button 3 was. And then I'll trigger and say, yes, a jump was pressed. The other flexibility that this gives us is at runtime, we can tell our game to actually display a configuration screen that shows these settings, which allows the player to change the ground functionality of the jump. Let's say they don't want the jump button to be the space bar, they want it to be the alt button.
Like rebinding on just about any game that you've ever played
Exactly.
on the PC.
So that allows your player at runtime to change the way your character is controlled, and you don't have to change anything in code.
Now, you can add some more inputs here. If I close up the jump buttons, let's say I'm playing a game that has the action button so that you can hit the action button to do things like climb ladders and whatnot.
Okay, so you could hit 18.
Set this up to 18, and we get a brand new input. Now, it's just going to duplicate whatever the bottommost one was.
Right.
But we can take the name, and we can set this to action.
All right. Positive button, usually a use or action button is typically the E key.
So we could take the positive button and just set this to E, for instance. Mm-hmm. And then we have all various axes we can look for and different controls. But the basic idea here is that we've just established a new thing to look for.
Right, and we gave it a default value. So when you went to run the game, you could say, oh, action. I don't want it to be E. I want it to be something else. You could change that. But as the coder writing these scripts, you can go check to see if the action button was pressed. If the action button is pressed, do something.
Right. So that is a quick look at the Input Manager. Again, that is available underneath Edit, Project Settings, underneath Inputs. That is going to wrap things up for this video. Thanks a lot.